Hi there. If we think about the life of a story as it goes through a project, you recall we talk about stories as being the high-level requirements in an Agile project, and we start off over here with a master story list. Part of the work at the beginning of every iteration is to decide which of these stories are currently the most important, how much work we can achieve within the iteration, and to then decide which ones we're going to work on, and they move into the analysis state. So let's say we've got these 5 stories that we've agreed this is the current most important set of work. It's quite likely that in reality in the previous iteration 1 or 2 of these will have already been elaborated into quite a lot of detail so that developers can start work and the testers working on designing the test cases already. So we'll say these stories are in development, these ones are in analysis, and on the daily stand-up, each team member reports their current state against the work that they're doing, and we record the movement of stories from one state to another. So the likely flow is from into analysis to into development to into testing, and then into user acceptance testing, and then into the done state. And the ideal situation would be at the end of an iteration, our story wall looks like this, with all the stories in the done state, completed, presented, able to be delivered into the production environment. So that's the ideal situation. The reality is likely to be somewhat different. And one of the good things about using a story wall is that it shows us very visibly what is actually going on. For instance, if we have a point in the project where the story wall looks like this, one thing in development, a whole lot of things in test, and nothing moving forward, that probably means that there's a bottleneck. There's not enough testing resources, the testers are overloaded. Likewise, if the stories are piling up in the development column, then they're probably, the developers are overloaded. And if they're piling up in the UAT column, our customer reps are not able to provide us with the input that we need and spend the time to help us move the stories through into done. Another thing that happens is, what if a story fails a test case? So let's say we're looking at something like that. We've got a couple of stories in test and it fails. Well, at this point we don't raise a defect, we don't record it on a bug log, but we do make a note either in the electronic repository, but certainly linked to the story, of what test has failed and why it's broken, and we put it back into the end dev state. The developer then picks it up and they work on it, and it moves forward into the in-test state, and if things have gone well, it moves forward then into user acceptance testing, and it moves into done. On the other hand, we could have the situation where it moves from in-test to in-dev, in-test to in-dev. This probably indicates some either lack of understanding of what the requirement actually is, or a problem with the testing, perhaps a problem in the relationship between the developers and the testers. One of the key roles of the iteration manager is to make sure that they're monitoring these types of activities and tracking on what's going on, and then addressing any issues that come up. So the visible nature of the story wall is something that really does help us in terms of the understanding the state of our project. Another not uncommon activity is what happens if during one of the testing cycles, either the tester testing, the acceptance testing, we find a problem that is not related to this particular iteration. It's a defect from some technical debt that is built up, a hangover from a previous iteration. In that case, we raise a new story. That story is a defect. If it's a severity 1 or 2, it goes straight into the end-dev column and it must be addressed before anything else. If it's a Sev 3 or 4, it would go onto the master story list, onto the backlog, and it will be prioritised and sequenced along with all of the other work during the next iteration planning meeting. This way we keep a track of defects that are coming up, but we do find that in-dev, in-test movement significantly reduces the level of defects that escape from an iteration. And it's one of the key areas where we see significant quality improvements from Agile projects. We cannot claim that a story is done unless all of the test cases have passed. So again, that active involvement of developers, testers, analysts, designers, working together to deliver business value rather than focusing on their siloed